Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. Naruto laid in a hospital bed with a blank expression on his face and with a tube stuck down his throat. He looked at peace, but every now and then, his eyelids would wiggle and tighten, as if he were looking around. The poor Namikaze was under a heavy coma, with patches and bandages covering his sliced open chest. The night of the attack had ruined Naruto in more ways than one. Because of the time it took for the Hyuga police to mobilize, Naruto had lost so much oxygen and blood to his brain that he was forced into a comatose state. He was put under extensive care for 15 hours before he finally stabilized. He looked so peaceful and free of thought. Unlike Kaide, the redhead was sitting up in her bed with a picture of her mother and her on one of the days where it was just the two of them. The girl was experiencing a major battle between herself and her emotions. As it stands, her mother was dead, but she didn't know if she should go out there and avenge her elder brother and mother and father, for what has happened to their family and clan. Her face was blank like her brother's, but instead of her body twitching, it would be the pupil in the center of her irides. It would sometimes elongate, but then it would go back to a circle. She tightened her grip on the picture in her tired hands. The faraway look never left her face as she continued to memorize her mother's facial features, red hair and beautiful violet eyes, her mother's smile, and her funny laugh. Kaide had placed up so many emotional barriers, but it seems that after being told about everything that has happened just the night before, she felt the walls of her emotions crumble. Then the image of her mother's attacker flashed into her mind. The giant Jinchuriki of Iowa, the Joki no Oji. Kaide furrowed her eyebrows and narrowed her eyes. His red armor and sword, stained with her mother's own blood. The glass began to crack on the picture frame. Kaide heard the crack and shut her eyes to calm down. Kaide sighed and turned over to place her picture on the bedside table, before lying down to drift off back to sleep. With Minato, the yellow flash of Konoha, the man revered as the fastest man on earth, the most powerful man on earth, a god amongst shinobi, but after the events of the night before, the young leader was distraught by the turn of events, and felt a great animosity for Iwa. He gripped his kunai so tight, that it was threatening to break and shatter. He glared at the Iwa Hittite sitting on his desk. He had half of a mind to go to Iwa and slaughter everyone using the Hiraishin, but he knew that wouldn't be what Kushina would have wanted. He growled in exasperation and lodged the kunai into the desk before collapsing onto the Hokage office seat. He took a deep breath and thought about his children. Naruto was in a near-death state, but Kaide was rendered unconscious, but thanks to his and his wife's efforts, Mito and Arashi were able to make it out, unscathed. Good thing the children weren't able to drink the alcohol. Minato pinched his brow to calm his raging emotions. He looked up with tears building up in his eyes. He channeled chakra and flashed from the Hokage's office. At the hospital, Minato flashed into Naruto's room with a distraught look on his face. He looked down at his son as tears burst from his eyes. He looked down at the sleeping boy on the bed, but he wasn't able to get to the golden-haired boy. Minato took Naruto's hand and gripped it tightly while saying a silent prayer. He looked over to see his daughter crying in her bed right behind him. The man spun in his chair and took her right hand into his left and tightened his grip on his two children. His body shook as tears cascaded down his face. He was supposed to be the most powerful man in the world. He can save millions, but he can't even save his own family and close friends. Minato took a shaky breath as his emotions were thrown into haywire. His sobbing degraded and became a hysterical wail. All throughout this he was tightening his hold on his children's hands, not wanting to let them go. In Naruto's mindscape, Kuro-chan, Naruto's heart wrenched. How could you? His mind kept replaying the death of Ino, the sick emotion that Kuro displayed as she jammed the sword into his wife's side. He watched as blood poured from Ino's mouth and splayed across the floor below her. How could she? Naruto asked as tears began to trickle down his face. Naruto, Kurama said softly. You need to wake up and get around the village, this isn't healthy for you. I know that, Naruto shouted as tears cascaded down his whiskered cheeks. I just want to know why Kuro would do such a thing. She's from Iowa Kit, Kurama shouted back. They are nothing but hard-headed, conniving, liars, that only have friendships if there's something to gain from it. I'm sorry to tell you this, Kit, but you have been played for a fool by the Yugenheim. Naruto sighed knowing that the Great Fox was right after all. Naruto didn't reply and just looked away. He just couldn't understand why she'd do this. Let me rest some more. I just can't deal with the world right now, and with that, the Namikaze shut off connection to the fox and lie down in the bed of his mindscape and let his mind within his mind drift to sleep. Outside, Kaide glared at the floor in front of her. She looked through her memories and realized who the orchestrator of the entire operation was. Yamauchi Kurotsuchi. Much to Naruto's displeasure, Kaide found out about his secret relationship with the Iowa princess. Kaide then got that Naruto really loved the girl and she loved him too, but the situation that they were born into denied them the ability to express their emotions for each other. To Naruto's surprise, Kaide never brought it up again and never told their parents or friends. But what really irked her was the fact that it was Kurotsuchi that killed Ino. It was Kurotsuchi who was behind the scenes the entire time, and only came out when Ino was finally free from the protection of Naruto's clones. It was Kurotsuchi who didn't stop her brother from killing her mother. It was Kurotsuchi's own jealousy of Naruto that brought the death of so many people. Or so Kaide thought. She sighed and looked over to her brother with a distraught expression on her face. I need to take a walk, Kaide thought to herself. She slid out of the bed and lifted her passed-out father and tucked him into her bed and walked out of the hospital room doors. The nurses and doctors were vilified at her actions to leave, but she shook it off and left anyway. She was too low on chakra to use the Hiraishin to get anywhere, and Yin Kurama was feeling too weak to refill her chakra reserves. From what Yin Kurama told Kaide, was that Yang Kurama has been disrupted and can't heal his container anymore. Kaide sighed. The poison used by the assassin severed the connection between the chakra coils of Naruto to the chakra coils of the Yang Kurama. The only things the two can do now are talk to one another and use each other's chakra, but the healing factor was as good as gone. The girl shook her head from the depressing thoughts and walked toward her favorite spot in the entire village, the park. Once there, she plopped down onto the grass and stared aimlessly at the clear blue sky with a blank expression on her face. She was hurting deeply as another realization just hit her. Mito and Arashi are only 3 years old, and they watched as their sister-in-law, clansman, and mother get slaughtered in one night. Kaide couldn't fathom how they must feel right now. At least they were under protection by the Kogen Kishi, which Kaide is in command of since Naruto was unconscious. She needed to find that bastard Han. She needed to get revenge. She needed to kill him. Tears formed in her eyes once more as she began to weep. She didn't know how Sasuke was as of yet since he was put under protection by Anbu and a few high-ranking Junins to make sure that Iowa doesn't send assassins again to kill him too. TCH. Kaide spat. Those Iowa bastards are gonna pay, especially Yamauchi Han. Especially Yamauchi Han. Kaide growled slightly and shot to her feet. She felt reinvigorated and powerful. Energy was surging through her body as she found her purpose. She was going to kill the son of the Tsuchikage with or without her brother's or father's permission. With or without a team, she was going to make Han's death a reality. Then she was going to go after Kurotsuchi. Kaide dashed off for the nearest training ground and started off her training with 300 push-ups, despite just coming out of the hospital. She felt sore, but she knew that her brother was doing worse, he wasn't even awake. She felt her muscles rip and her nerves break down, but she knew that Sasuke was doing worse, his entire family was murdered before his eyes in one night. She felt her will break, but she knew her father was doing worse, the love of his life was killed right in front of him. I can't let anyone down. Kaide told herself over and over again. I can't let them suffer any longer. Once Kaide finished her 300 push-ups, she took off in a full sprint around the village, taking many laps on foot since she didn't have enough chakra for practicing ninjutsu or genjutsu. She couldn't even practice with Yin Kurama, since her chakra coils were damaged as well, but not as bad as Naruto's. All she needed to do was give her some time before doing ninjutsu. As she came to a halt, she realized that she needed a sparring partner for taijutsu. She jogged into the training ground to see a team of Anbu standing around looking for her. The red-headed beauty dashed from the trees and charged at the Anbu agents and sent a fist into one's face, breaking off his crow mask. Think of this as training, boys. Kaide called out as she leg swept another Anbu. This Anbu had a stag mask on his face. The bear-masked Anbu charged at Kaide, but she easily dodged his attack and sent a kick to the base of his spine, knocking him to the ground below. She jumped up and drop-kicked the final Anbu, who wore a lion's mask. The Anbu were terrified of the girl and called in a few more agents to help out. Kaide only smirked. She weaved in between each attack and sent a few well-placed punches and continued to hold her own against the Anbu and knock out at least 8 of them, leaving 10 to still deal with. She jumped and kicked one back, while she lodged her fist into the right temple of an Anbu, knocking both away, while keeping her safe from any attacks from either side. A tiger-masked Anbu charged at her, and she caught his tanto-wielding wrist and twisted, causing the agent to squeal in pain. She kicked the man away and engaged against another masked shinobi. Once she closed the distance, she lodged her elbow against his face and floored the shinobi, causing him to cry in pain. Behind Kaide though, a cat-masked female Anbu charged from behind with her katana drawn. Kaide spun around and evaded the attack and kicked the Anbu in the back and sent her flying towards another Anbu. The redhead jumped away and landed on a tree branch and sent a flurry of shuriken and kunai towards her opponents. The shinobi blocked and evaded the kunai without looking at the type. Kaide smirked and popped her neck. Hiraishin no Jutsu. The girl vanished in a flash of light and reappeared behind one of the Anbu and punched his back. She flashed once more and kicked another, but it was so fast no one could tell what was going on. She may not have been as fast as her brother or father, but she was still pretty fast. Just as she was coming to her final opponent, there was a small glint in the corner of her eye. She drew out a kunai and blocked the strange-looking kunai. It was a lot like the kunai blades, where only one side was sharpened. That kunai blew off her 3-pronged kunai. The Anbu and Kaide narrowed their eyes at the blank-faced Anbu that stood before them. It sure looked like a Konoha shinobi, but there was no sign showing that it was of Konoha. Kaide nodded at 2 of the Anbu, bear and lion. The 2 took a cautious pace towards the newcomer. They drew out their tantos as they examined the opponent. But before they could attack, the blank-faced Anbu charged and slashed through the masks, killing bear and lion in less than a second. Blank-face turned to face tiger and horse. Tiger charged forward with his ninjutsu drawn, but blank-face dodged and punched Tiger in his spine. Horse sped through hand seals, and sent off a grand fireball towards the newcomer. Just as the fireball came within a few centimeters, blank-face popped into a puff of smoke and replaced himself with a log. The man reappeared behind horse. The man stabbed a kunai blade that he pulled from practically nowhere, and stabbed the blade through the Anbu's spine and forced it out the front of the man's torso. Blank Face tore the blade from Horse's body and kicked him down like he was trash. 3 more Anbu attacked, but they each suffered the same fate. Kaide-sama, stay back and let, Neko began to say, but Kaide shook her head. The cat-masked Anbu could easily say, this is the scariest that Kaide has ever been seen. Her hair seemed to glow with an ominous color, as if she had chakra coils in her hair. Her bangs overflowed and flittered down to cover her eyes in a dark shade. Her once bright blue eyes were glowing with a blood-red tint. Her chakra flared and her whisker marks darkened. Her canines elongated, making her seem more terrifying than what she intended. I'm sorry, Neko, but you'll all have to stay back for this one, Kaide whispered before she took off with a super burst of speed. With chakra coming off her legs and body, she closed the distance between herself and her opponent. Once she did, she rammed her fist into his gut and followed it up with another punch to the man's throat. She spun on the heel of her foot and sent a roundhouse kick into his face, shattering his mask, while sending him flying. She hurled a kunai at him expecting it to miss, but the 3-pronged kunai fit snugly in his kunai pouch. Kaide smirked at her luck and vanished only to reappear behind him. She kneed the mask-less Anbu and sent him flying once more. She vanished once more, and for the next few minutes, it was like a game of ping-pong with the man acting as the ping-pong ball. Just as he was about to smack with her once more, she had drawn out her Hiraishin kunai from his kunai pouch and channeled her chakra through the main blade, turning it into a blade of chakra. Just before the man collided with her, she lodged her kunai into his gut and slashed out, slicing the man in half. His intestines spilled free from his body as he began to die. Kaide growled at the man and realized that he wasn't of Konoha. His facial structure was different than from the people of Konoha. She wanted to test her hypothesis and dug her hand into his body and began to sift and dug through his internal organs, until she felt his heart. Her eyes were still glowing with the power of Kurama. She looked him straight in the eye before she tore his heart out, making sure that she was the last thing he saw, before he was sent to hell. She pulled the heart free from his body and held the still, somewhat beating heart and examined the organ. Her anger only peaked when she found what she was looking for. There was a small Iwa symbol carved into the aorta of the heart. That man was an Iwa assassin. From what she knew, there were 2 different types of Anbu in Iwa, the normal Anbu and Ganbon agents. The Ganbon agents were a lot like Konoha's root, but they were worse. Ganbon agents were devoted to the cause. So devoted that each member must carve into his own heart the symbol of Iwa using only chakra. Many wouldn't be able to take the pain, while others, like the one she just finished off, lose their humanity and their sanity. Kaide dropped the heart and sealed it into a scroll. Anbu were healing those wounded and were moving the dead from the training ground. The redhead sighed at her predicament. She looked up to the sky and saw dark clouds on the horizon. Kaide sighed once more. Something is coming. Something big. Very big. A week later, Kaide was standing in front of her father. The blonde Hokage sat on the throne with his parents standing behind him. Tsunade, the former 3rd Hokage, was at his left while Jiraiya was at his right. Minato's face was blank and it seemed like he hasn't had sleep for a few days. Large eye bags were visible. His once vibrant blue eyes were dull and seemed to be lifeless. His daughter looked at him with a frown, but Minato didn't say a thing. As much as he loved his village and his job, he loved his wife more. He loved his family more, he loved his clan more, but now most of them were dead and his son, his firstborn, was still in a coma. Kaide took a deep breath and sighed. She walked up to her father and gave him a tight hug. Minato barely looked at his daughter. and kept his eyes planted on the floor beneath him. The girl relinquished her hold on her father and turned away and headed for the front door. Once out, she headed towards the mission assignment office at the Shinobi Administration building and went to the Junin commander. The commander in charge for the day was Nara Shikaku. "Shikaku-san," Kaide said as she entered the assignment room. There were Chunin and Junin walking around and sifting through scrolls and creating new missions. "I need you to help me make an assignment." "For whom is it to be assigned to?" Shikaku asked. "To me," Kaide said. "It is to be triple S ranked." "What?" Shikaku gasped in surprise. "Are you sure? Your brother is still in the hospital and your father is barely coping." "Shut up and do as you're ordered, Nara," Kaide shouted in exasperation. There was an awkward silence that quickly followed. A few gasps were heard though as every shinobi present looked with wide eyes. Shikaku's eyes were wide with hurt. Never had Kaide ever pulled rank or family name when she asked for something. Even if she was in command, she'd never do something so degrading. Kaide was literally one of the kindest people to walk this earth, but even the nicest people have a breaking point. Shikaku sighed and nodded at Kaide. The redhead took a deep breath and gave him a sad smile and apologized. "Now come with me," Shikaku said as he led her to his personal office. Shikaku channeled chakra onto the walls, completely silencing the room from the outside world. No one can hear what is going on. He sat down at his desk and rolled open an empty scroll and took out a calligraphy brush and ink. "So, what are the mission parameters?" "Objective. Targets. Payment. Mission parameters. Time limit is undefined. This is a solo mission. Objective is to eliminate the conspirators of the Uchiha Senju massacre." Shikaku's ears perked slightly. "Targets. Yamauchi Han and his top subordinates and the highest commanders of Ganbon. The only payment I will accept is their spilt blood." Kaide growled. "This is just legalized revenge." Shikaku shouted. "I can't allow this. But you will, Shikaku. You Ing will." Kaide growled. "I can't let that bastard and his lackeys walk so freely throughout the world and wreak havoc and force more families and people to suffer like Sasuke, and my own family. My brother is still in a coma. My father hasn't said a thing for more than a week. My younger siblings have been traumatized since that night. They don't talk. They lost their light. They don't smile anymore. They're just children. I can't allow their treachery continue." Kaide slammed her fists on Shikaku's desk. "I have to kill them." To get her point across, she flared her Biju's chakra and forced the power to her eyes, causing them to change into their blood-red state. Shikaku shrunk in his seat as the killing intent became so great, that he began to sweat bullets in fear. Kaide shrunk her chakra back and glared at the Nara clan head. "If this is what you wish to do," Shikaku sighed, "then I won't stop you." "Thank you, Shikaku-san." Kaide turned and headed out of the door. "I'll notify." Before Shikaku could finish, the girl flashed away. TCH. Mendokusai. With Kaide. The redhead sat on a stool in her favorite restaurant, Ichiraku Ramen. She was chowing down on her 15th bowl of ramen. As much as she hated it, she just had to have the same appetite as her brother. It's not that she didn't love ramen, which she did, she just wanted to have some restraint of it, unlike her mother and brother. Kaide let out a small laugh from the memory and shook her head. She dug her chopsticks into the luscious noodles and slurped them up before slapping down a wad of Rio notes and heading out of the restaurant towards the Anbu headquarters to speak with a few of the Anbu commanders. She calmly strolled through the headquarters and walked through the main doors and found the commander's barracks. She scratched the back of her neck and knocked on a door that read Azuki Yugao. Kaide entered the room after Yugao allowed her in. The redhead sat in the chair adjacent to the purple-haired woman's own. "Yugao, I need to ask a favor of you," Kaide said. "What is it?" Yugao asked her favorite student. I need you to call and pool in information about the Kuroi Manto and the highest-ranking Ganbon agents. Kaide asked. I want to know their schedules, their daily routines, I want to know everything, down to their sandal size. Why? Yugao asked. Not saying that I can't do it, I just want to know why. I'm going to kill them. Kaide said. It's a mission that I devised along with the help of Shikaku. A war is going to happen soon between us and Iowa, so why not get rid of the VISs before the war begins, right? Or are you just seeking vengeance? Yugao asked. What does it matter? Kaide growled. This is not how I taught you. Vengeance will only corrupt you, Yugao replied. Kaide was about to protest, but Yugao raised her hand and quieted the Kunoichi princess. But since you are my princess, I must abide to your command. Thank you, Yugao-sensei. I won't let Konoha down. Kaide turned to leave, but stopped and looked at her former teacher. Any pointers or people to start off on? Indeed I do. Yugao sighed. The woman tossed the princess a black scroll labeled Kuroi Manto, Han. Kaide gasped when she realized that there is a Kuroi Manto unit for both Kurotsuchi and Han. The red-headed Namikaze smiled and walked from the office with a thoughtful look on her face. The girl flashed away and reappeared in her bedroom. She plopped onto her bed and opened up the scroll and found nearly 20 different shinobi profiles. Each member she read ranged from powerful to overbearing, with Yamauchi Han at the top. The girl examined each person and chose her first target. A low-leveled member of the Kuroi Manto named Teramoto Ishida. Kaide examined his facial expression and facial features down the minutest detail. Ishida Teramoto. Age. 30. Gender. Male. Height. 5 feet 10. Weight. 230 pounds. Hair color. Black. Eye color. Green. Blood type. AB+. Element. Explosion release. Rank. High Junin level. Black Cloak Lieutenant. He is a highly volatile and violent man, prone to outbursts and random sprouts of anger. He is also prone to bribery and alcohol. Lots of alcohol. Spends a great deal of the money he makes from missions and from being a part of the Kuroi Manto, in bars, getting wasted and drunk. His favorite drink is Suntory Yamazaki 18 whiskey. He normally drinks 8 shots before moving on to sake. That is his weakness. Kaide thought to herself. No wonder he's such a lowly manto. Frequent locations. Ganbon headquarters. Anbu Administration Building. The Cracked Stone Pub. Shadowed Rock Pub. Mountainous Soil Pub. God damn it. How many pubs does this guy go to? Kaide thought in exasperation. This guy's nothing but a drunk. This'll be too easy. Tsuchikage Palace. Kamizuru Palace. Random streets of the 5 villages of Iwagakure. Hidden Stone Nightclub. Misk. Because of his paranoia, he doesn't take the same way home, so it is nearly impossible to actually track him down, unless you stalk him throughout the city itself. Streets in Iowa are confusing and maze-like, unless you know where you're going. Teramoto usually heads home, but stops at the Hidden Stone nightclub and parties throughout the night and returns home wasted or wakes up on the street. Wow. Kaide finished reading the specifics of her target and shook her head in disgust. What a waste of talent. 3 weeks later, Kaide left the village after bidding her unresponsive father and kissing her comatose brother on the forehead goodbye for the time being. Minato didn't know about the true specifics of the mission, but since he didn't talk much anymore, he didn't really express the need for information. Her younger siblings, Mito and Arashi, were waving her goodbye with their sensei Orochimaru. The elder sister walked away and slowly broke into a steady sprint. She jumped high and took to the trees with a bit of chakra in each step. The girl flew farther and farther, closing the distance between Konoha and Iowa a lot faster than what it could normally take. Once she felt that she was a sufficient distance away, she slowed her speed and took in the sights of Hai no Kuni. In the distance, great mountains towered over the blue hue of a horizon. Green trees and great wondrousness of nature surrounded her. She watched as Monkey jumped with her through the trees and on branches. She dipped underneath a low branch and grabbed onto it and swung around before shooting forward using her current momentum to her advantage. When she landed, though, she landed in a feeding frenzy. Wolves were gorging on a dying stag. The stag was alone, but it tried to fight back. Kaide sneered and charged forward, with her katana drawn. With one great swoop, the alpha was decapitated. The other wolves quickly ran off into the forest. Kaide looked down at the dying stag and frowned. The poor thing tried to stand, but it gave her a look that said, "Leave me be." Kaide couldn't let the poor animal die in pain, so she took her weapon and jammed it into the stag's skull, putting it out of its misery. She then realized that the stag could be used for food later on, so she sealed up the corpse in a scroll and took off through the forest once more. She dodged falling leaves and breaking branches, flying birds, and met up with the occasional shinobi team going about on CA-ranked missions. She dashed through the land of fire at a good pace and was already close to the border with still an hour of daylight remaining before she entered Aim no Kuni, the border nation between Tsuchi no Kuni and Hai no Kuni. She came to a grinding halt and started setting up in the forest. Her tent was put up by a shadow clone while two other shadow clones went off for firewood and to gather extra food. All of this while Kaide sat down to meditate and practice her poisons and summoning contract with both the snakes and toads. Much to everyone's surprise, the girl had taken a liking to snakes because of their versatility and ability to secrete various venoms and poisons. The same could be said about the toads. She was now testing which poison would be more suited for Teramoto. The whiskey could dilute and kill off the venom and poison, so she had to be careful and choose her style of kill very carefully. She could also always just go with the traditional tag and snag approach. She then snapped her fingers and smiled at her revelation. All she had to do now was get information of where the bastard is. After eating a nice dinner of rice and stag meat, she was now lying in her sleeping bag in her tent while holding a picture of just her mother and her brother. The two of them seemed so alike, minus the obvious differences. Naruto had his mother's eyes and face and even her attitude, while Kaide got her mother's hair and the rest is her father's. She traced her fingers over the picture and said a soft prayer and made a quiet promise to her brother and mother that she'd get revenge. She'll avenge the entire massacre by herself if she has to. Good night, mother. Good night, Ni-san. I love you guys. Kaide yawned before drifting off to sleep with a team of shadow clones standing guard outside of her tent. Kaide awoke from a wonderful dream where her mother was still alive and her brother was awake to join her on her mission. Her life seemed brighter and more vibrant. She looked around to only be disappointed at the fact that it was all just a dream. Her heart wrenched at the feeling of knowing that it was really how it was going to be. Suddenly, from out of the blue, a messenger hawk swooped down the forest canopy and glided into Kaide's tent and perched itself onto her shoulder. Attached to its leg was a small scroll with the symbol of Konoha's Anbu. Kaide quickly detached the message and unraveled the scroll. With her bright blue eyes scanning over the message, a bright smile spread across her face. He's near, Kaide smiled. In Omegakure, a safe haven for missing ninja, foreign shinobi, criminals, or just all-round douchebags. Omegakure was home to anyone, especially the great string of nightclubs and strip clubs. Such as the famous Hidden Stone nightclub for resting Iwa shinobi, or rich Iwa shinobi, such as those that are a part of the Kuroi Manto. On this specific night in Omegakure, the people were holding a major celebration on the streets. A large indoor festival was taking place. People were drinking and partying and enjoying their time, especially one super buzzed Iowa shinobi with a black plate. On top of the plate was a bright metal plate that had the Iowa symbol etched deeply to show off his pride. On his back was a large cleaver sword. In his right hand was a bottle of whiskey, in his other hand was a bottle of tequila. In his arms was a beautiful brunette and a beautiful blonde. Both girls were voluptuous and downright sexy, but they were also prostitutes. The man had a slight wobble to each step he took. His head drooped and shook as he walked farther and farther. Not only was he losing his concentration, but the hookers were also stealing his money. Kaide was hanged as a busty brunette hostess and smirked at the man's carelessness and walked over to the hookers and slapped their hands away from his pockets. The prostitutes looked at the woman in anger and nearly had an outburst, until Teramoto himself told the prostitutes off. He looked at Kaide with a small lecherous smirk. "Can I get you a seat, sir?" Kaide asked with a small smile. She was dressed in a very revealing outfit that was required for the hostesses and waitresses of the club. Open shirts that revealed a little too much for comfort and very short shorts that seemed to accentuate hair a bit much. Teramoto had a small trail of drool coming from his drunken mouth. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Not that anyone would notice since his clothes were so black, but Kaide had subtly placed a Harishan seal on his shoulder. She carefully sat the man down into a stool and pulled out a shot glass for the man. "Fun night, huh?" Kaide asked. "You have no idea, baby," Teramoto slurred. "How about me and you have some of our own fun, back at my place?" The man reached forward and groped her right, causing Kaide to gasp in surprise. She blushed not from being aroused, but from embarrassment, not that Teramoto would tell. Kaide quickly slapped his hand away with a playful smirk. "Play along. Get him alone, get the information." Kaide put on her nicest smile and gave him a playful look. "Maybe we should. Thank you for the drinks, lovely lady." Teramoto sounded like he had just sobered up. "Here's my address." The man then took off with the speed of light in his feet. Kaide looked dumbfounded but shook it off and headed out of the festival and into the rain. There were hundreds of people just walking about and through the rain and continuing their daily business. She found a secluded alleyway and her eye shined to Teramoto's position and stayed a few meters away. She dispelled the henge to reveal a beautiful redhead with the same bust but with gray armor over her clothes. She followed her target with silence and precision. She looked back into her memories and found that this was the address that Teramoto had written down onto the paper. It was a large penthouse with Iowa shinobi posted at all entrances and exits. There were 4 at the front door, and at the least 10 on the roof. At random intervals in the windows, there would be an Iowa infantryman waiting and watching the street below. "It seems that this is going to be easier than I thought." Kaide smiled. She walked away and disappeared into the crowds of people before Teramoto could notice her chakra signature. But once he did, it was too late. The girl was already gone. At her hotel, Kaide her eye shined to her hotel room and looked at the wall that was adorned with pictures. Threads were stretched from Han to every person and picture on the wall. One by one, she was trying to find their common place and connections with each other than just the Kuroi Manto or the Ganbon. The grand prize was Han, which would lead to the grandest of all prizes, Kurotsuchi. Kaide walked over to the wall and examined each persona and looked through their files and accolades. She sifted through their personal lives and family members. She had done a great deal of research, and all she had so far was Teramoto, the lowest member of the Kuroi Manto. As it was, she was still at least 20 targets to go, until she got to Han. She sighed in exasperation and plopped onto her bed and flipped out a picture of her mother and brother. Their smiling faces were there looking at her and they seemed to be wishing her luck. She missed her brother's voice, she missed her mother's laugh. She wasn't going to let this go, Even if somehow she gave up on her vendetta, she will never forget what they had taken from her. Kurotsuchi-ing loved him, Kaide growled. But Shi-ing nearly had him killed, and now he won't wake up. I swear I'm going to love killing that bitch. Kaide sighed in exasperation and laid back down into her bed and shut her eyes to rest. The different ways of killing the one who wronged her twin came up in different ways. Each way brutal and very fitting for what the girl had done. The next night, Kaide appeared at the front of Teramoto's hotel and showed them the guards the paper that Teramoto had given her, and they let the busty brunette through. She was mentally seething because of their disrespect towards her body and their constant leering, but she knew it was all just a part of the mission. Certain things had to be done for the sake of the mission and the sake of success. Once she got to the stairs, she was suddenly stopped by two Iwa shinobi. Identification. The larger man said, I don't have identification. Kaide replied, I was invited here by Teramoto. Here. Hey. The larger of the two shinobi grabbed her little paper and tore it in half. He spat on the halves and threw them on the floor. You're not passing unless you have the proper identification. The larger shinobi said with a gruff voice. The smaller shinobi then whispered something in the larger man's ear and the larger man nodded in agreement. Kaide shook her head since she heard them with her advanced hearing ability. She brought her hands to the bottom of her shirt and began to lift. The two shinobi were blushing madly as Kaide brought it up to the bottom of her S and to where the lumps could be seen. Kaide lifted her shirt all the way, allowing her large S to pop out and bounce slightly. Happy? Kaide asked with a growl. The two Iwa shinobi nodded and stepped out of her way. Kaide pulled down her shirt and stomped up the stairs. At the penthouse level, Kaide knocked on the door and was quickly let in by two more Iwa shinobi. Once inside, all she could see were women, more women and men with black cloaks. There were at last 10 men with black cloaks, but there were only 3 that she recognized. Upon entering, she subtly made 20 shadow clones and sent them throughout the penthouse, especially to the second floor to deal with whatever problem there may be. There was a second floor to the penthouse with an indoor balcony covering the first floor. Metal railings kept people from falling off the side, and it also made a great way to execute someone. Kaide made sure to keep a note of that. It also had a great vantage point to hurl Hiraishin kunai if needed, to quickly erase the problem in front of her. But back to the 3 members that she recognized. Their names were Teramoto, Takei Akino and Dao Mario. She looked at them with confused faces at first. But then the names came shooting back into her memories. Akino Takei. Age. 29. Gender. Male. Height. 6 feet 2 inches. Weight. 213 pounds. Hair color. Brown. Eye color. Black. Blood type. B+. Element. Lava. Rank. High-level Ganbon agent. Black Cloak Lieutenant. He is powerful and intellectually advanced compared to most of the members of his unit. Despite being an intellectual, he is easily chided and easily roused by the simplest of insults. He is highly proficient in his Kekkei Genkei and he doesn't take his opponents for granted. He is an honorable foe, despite being a part of the Kuroi Manto Han. Frequent locations. The Graveyard of Heroes in Iwagakure. The Tsuchikage Palace. Anbu Ganbon Headquarters. Ganbon Administration Building. Training Ground 15 of Iwagakure, aka the Rock Rain Lands. Hidden Stone Nightclub. Mario Dao. Age. 19. Gender. Male. Height. 6 feet 1 inch. Weight. 210 pounds. Hair color. Black. Eye color. Black. Blood type. O. Element. Strong fire affinity. Rank. High Junin level. Black Cloak Lieutenant. Not much is known, except that he is extremely powerful with fire release techniques. He is fast and quick and can speed through fire jutsu with no time at all. He is also one of the youngest members of the Kuroi Manto. Frequent places. Anywhere Akino and Teramoto go. So, this is where it begins, huh? Kaide took a deep breath and continued on, receiving stares and weird looks from the people present. I could always back out. No. Kurama shouted from within. You have gone too far to back out. Just remember, once you've started, there's no turning back, Kaide replied. It's time to start my path, this is what has to be done, right? The girl asked rhetorically. Hey, I see you've made it. Teramoto walked up to Kaide and wrapped his arm around her shoulder. The thing that bothered her was that his hand was a little too wandering. Some of the black cloaks were looking at her with interested expressions, while others marveled at her beauty. I was wondering if you were going to make it or not. You know, the rain can get pretty hectic. Yeah, I've lived here my whole life, you know. Kaide replied as she plopped down onto one of the leather seats. So what brings you here? Just taking a vacation is all. Teramoto replied with a smirk. Just finished a mission with my two comrades, Takei and Dao. Come over here, guys. What is it, Toru? Takei asked as he sat down with a whiskey bottle in his hand. Dao followed suit and sat on the other side of Teramoto. The boy examined Kaide with a confused and calculating look, as if he was questioning what he was looking at. He narrowed his eyes and looked away from Kaide. Single quote exclamation mark. I think he saw through my genjutsu and seals. Kaide thought in horror. I guess I'll have to go to plan B. Well then, beautiful. Toru started. What drink? Kaide suddenly grabbed Teramoto by his head and smashed his face into the glass table in front of him and crashed his head through the top, embedding small shards of glass into his head. Dao jumped back and sent a few blasts of fire that Kaide easily blocked and slapped away. She charged for the two men and slapped them across the face, while implanting invisible Harishan seals on their cheeks. Women were screaming and running out of the penthouse while shinobi in black cloaks were walking about with their weapons drawn. They glared at her as Takei and Dao joined up with the rest of the security detail. I'm here for 3 people. Teramoto, Takei and Dao. Kaide said with a powerful voice. The rest of you can leave and I won't bother you. She doesn't even know who we are. One of the Iowa shinobi laughed. We're the Kuroi Manto, the personal army of Yamauchi Han, the Grand Prince of Iowa, blah, blah, blah. Kaide smirked. Many Iowa shinobi growled at the blatant show of disrespect. Listen, hun, do I look like I give a damn? Before they could reply, she vanished in a flash of light and punched Takei and Dao at the same time within the same second. It looked like there were 2 attackers. It happened so fast that many of the black cloaks shivered in fear of what was to come. Kaide quickly grabbed her targets and threw them towards the unconscious Teramoto and caused the 3 of them to pile up on each other. What no one noticed was the ceiling scroll beneath them. Kaide sent them a small smile and dispelled her genjutsu just as the 3 high-ranking lieutenants were sealed within the scroll. The scroll suddenly rolled itself back up and beneath the scroll was a Harishan kunai attached to Kaide through chakra strings. With a quick flash of hand seals, the scroll was suddenly wrapped in seal matrices, and was into the kunai. Aye, it's the aka Haim. One of the Kuroi Manto minions shouted in fear. She's out for revenge. Oh, indeed I am. Kaide sneered. She raised her hand and suddenly 10 Kuroi Manto members were slung over the second floor with rope tied around their necks. The 10 in front of her were horrified, but they turned to head in the other direction, but 10 more Kuroi Manto members fell down with rope tightly wrapped around their necks. It's time to die. This is when things get really dark. So you have been warned. You may skip if you wish. 10 minutes later, Kaide's hotel room. She flashed into the room with a scroll with tools sealed within it. The scroll had a Phillips head and flathead screwdriver, a chakra-fed drill, pliers, jumper cables, a hammer and some rusty nails, a cheese grater, a spiked mallet, a thick towel, a washboard, some sandpaper, 3 chairs, a bench and buckets. She turned on the lights and headed off to the main room of the hotel, happy that she got the biggest room they had. There were 5 rooms, each one was empty if you wanted it to be. She was pretty happy that she put silencing seals all over the hotel room. She didn't want the authorities to know of what she was about to do. She was going to have a field day. Good thing she picked up a lot by learning from Anko and Ibiki at the T&I division of Konoha. She felt her heartbeat knowing that it was going to be her first step to the ultimate goal. She walked into the first room to see shadow clones standing next to a chained up and sealed Teramoto. He had a massive array of seals drawn onto his body and on the floor around him. He couldn't talk, but he sure was going to be able to scream. The seals negated his ability to move, but kept his ability to breathe and feel pain. The clones grabbed the man to his feet. Small pieces of glass were still embedded in his skin with large trails of blood flowing from his forehead down to his jawline. His breaths were hard and low. He was too afraid to look at Kaide for fear of what she would do. In her hands were a hammer and a few rusty nails. His heartbeat rose when he saw the whisker marks and the electric blue eyes glaring into his soul. He knew who it was. He was the one who knocked her out. How could he forget the powerful red hair that she had? Namikaze Kaide, Teramoto grunted. So you can talk now. Kaide said as she began to pace slowly. Good. I will require that you give me information about certain members of your group, namely, Yamauchi Han, and the one who stabbed my brother through the chest. I'll never. Splash. Gah. Teramoto howled in pain. He looked to see his right hand was stretched out with the first nail stabbed through it and into the wall, well at least the tip. What are you doing? Getting information. Kaide said darkly. I have Dao and Takei prisoner too. And by the way, scream and squeal all you want. No one will hear you. I have placed silencing seals all over the room and windows, even the ing roof. No one will hear outside of this hotel room. I swore an oath of secrecy. Toru screamed at Kaide. Wrong answer. Kaide hammered the nail deeper into his hand. The rust sending contaminants into his body as it rubbed with his ruptured veins and arteries. He grunted in pain, but then the hurt subsided. He looked at Kaide with fire burning in his eyes. You can try to cast a jutsu or whatever, but I've sealed off your chakra coils. Kaide said just as Toru took a deep breath. Now then, do you want to continue being resistant, or do you want to finally divulge the information that I want? I don't care, you whore. Teramoto spat onto Kaide's face. Her clones bashed the man in his gut and chest with metal tonfa and forced his head against the wall, drawing blood. I guess I'll have to move on to the main course. Kaide sighed in disappointment. She took out the Phillips screwdriver and took out a few screws and put one to the man's open palm. He started struggling as tears formed in his eyes. The clones were holding his head up as he struggled to keep his palm closed. The other clone was forcing his fingers open while Kaide imbued chakra into the screw. Another shadow clone was formed and punched Teramoto in his lower abdomen, causing him to weaken his grip. His hand opened up and Kaide rammed the screw into his palm and began to turn the bolt into his skin. Skin was torn and deformed and twisted as she herself twisted his wrist with each rotation of the screwdriver. Toru howled in pain but still deigned from saying anything. Blood was pouring from his hands and from his mouth. One of her clones lifted the man's head up and bashed it into the wall once more. This time, his scalp was pressed against the wall with his neck showing. Kaide took her longest nail and put it against his Adam's apple and held the head of the hammer against the nail head. Now, this is your last chance. One of her clones said. You were wrong to think that you're worth something to the Kuroi Manto. Another growled. You're expendable. I've read up on your history and personal life. The last clone spoke in a condescending tone. You have lived a worthless and immoral life. You are a textbook definition of a waste of talent and space, so do yourself a favor and give us the information we want. Never, bitch. Kaide shook her head in disgust with his reply. I gave you a chance. The girl raised her hand and rammed the entire nail into his throat and into the wall, nailing his body to the wall of the room. His eyes were wide as blood began to clog up his trachea and esophagus. Blood poured from his mouth like a waterfall and dripped onto the floor beneath him. His head twitched as he began to mumble an incoherent prayer of sorts. His eyes suddenly dilated and rolled to the back of his head. I guess it's time to move on to the next two. I guess I should check on Takei. She left the room with the dead man still nailed to the wall and left her clones to deal with his body. She picked up one of the towels sitting on a couch and wiped her hands and forearms clean of the blood and calmly walked into one of the other rooms. Once she opened the door, the overbearing scent of blood bombarded her nose and nearly had her keeling over to hurl. Sealed to a chair in the center of the room was a shirtless man, howling in pain as three Kaides sat around him skinning him piece by piece, inch by inch. A cheese grater was being used to peel off the skin of his right arm, a washboard used to scrape jeans and dirty clothing was peeling off his skin from his torso, and the sandpaper was being used to tear off skin from his left arm. He howled and screamed for his life, but to no avail. The only parts of his body that still had skin were his neck and his face. Stop, Kaide said. The clones dropped their tools and backed away from Takei. The man was gasping for breath. The seals were embedded into his skin and flesh with kanji marks engraved in his revealed muscles. Now, tell me what I want to know. Where is Yamauchi-han? And who is the one that stabbed my brother? Kaide shouted. I can tell you who stabbed your brother, but I don't know where Han-sama is, Takei moaned in pain. His breath was slow and labored. The man who nearly killed your brother. Takei stopped to take a deep breath. What? Kaide shouted, punching the man in his skinless chest. Tell me. I don't remember, Takei groaned. You liar. She channeled Kurama's chakra into her bare hands and pressed them against his flesh. The dark chakra flared and intensified Takei's pain. His muscles tensed and decayed. He kept screaming and screaming, but Kaide didn't stop. He writhed in pain and kept shaking, but Kaide didn't let up. This man was going to die one way or another. After a few seconds, Kaide realized that she was desecrating a dead body. Takei had been dead for quite some time before she stopped. Kaide looked at her clones and nodded her head at them. She shook her head and walked from the door and headed into the next room. The final room, with Dao. She entered the room and found Dao gurgling and choking violently. A towel was held onto his face by a shadow clone, while another slowly poured water onto the man, choking and practically drowning him. His body twitched and writhed under the pressure of the torture, but he couldn't express his pain. He screamed, but every time he opened his mouth, water would force its way down his nose and throat and into his trachea. Stop, Kaide said once more as she entered the room. The clones backed away and removed the towel from his face and threw it on the floor and pulled the boy from the bench and tied him to a metal chair with the jumper cables. Two more clones went to the wall and blew a hole into it and used the pliers to tear open the wiring of the room and rewired it to act as an electric chair. Who stabbed my brother? And where is Yamauchi-han? Kaide slammed her palms onto the arms of the metal chair. I don't know where he is. Dao screamed. Kaide was taken aback by his quick response. We each went our different ways after the operation went down. Kurotsuchi-sama made it home, but it seems that Han and the rest of the manto under his control are on the run or in hiding. I see, Kaide replied. Now, do you know who nearly killed my brother? Yes, Dao replied. Please, I don't want to die. Tears formed in his eyes as he begged for life. I was forced into the manto because of my talent. I want to live, please. Then go on. Tell me about this man. Kaide said as she sat down on a plastic chair in front of Dao. Disturbing part over. His name, Dao looked nervous. Yamanaka Inoichi. Silence. Kaide's jaw dropped at the information. She didn't know if she was to believe it, or to disregard it, but it must have been for a reason. No one would place the blame on a noble clan head of Konoha, and family friend for no reason at all. Kaide growled deeply and narrowed her eyes at Dao, before grabbing the spiked mallet and ramming it across his face, tearing open his cheek revealing busted molars and canines. Dao's tears finally fell as he looked at Kaide with fear. Please, he begged. I'm telling the truth. Kaide shook her head in disgust but sat back down onto her chair and looked Dao in the eyes. Now, to Han's top captains, Okano Tetsui, Manabu Aige and Uemura Soichiro. Where are they? They are bound to know about Han's location. Kaide said, taking slow and deep breaths. I don't know either, Dao whimpered. Please. I'm just a lowly lieutenant. But I do know someone who might know of their location. Then stop wasting my time. Kaide shouted as she bashed his chest with the mallet. Start off with Tetsui Taiko's main subordinate, Ogura Kiyohisa. Dao shouted. All right, now where do I find him? Kaide asked. She inwardly smiled knowing that she was finally getting some progress. You'll find him at Okushin-jo. Dao replied. But it's one of the most heavily defended fortresses in all of Tsuchi no Kuni. It has a garrison of nearly 500 infantry and 100 shinobi. Well, I am a ninja, Kaide smirked. This is what I've been trained to do, kid. Kaide turned to leave. Her clones had finished the complete rewire of the room and started placing tags all over the hotel room. The living room, the dining room, the bathroom, the 3 torture rooms and Dao's own room. He started shaking uncontrollably. Hey, he cried. Please. Don't leave me here. The clones shook their heads and dispersed once they finished their jobs. He watched as Kaide stopped at the door frame. She reached over to the light switch and stopped just before she flicked it on. She began to contemplate her choices and heard his cries for mercy. She could always do that, and start off on a good note with kindness, but then again, he didn't deserve kindness. Who knew how many Uchiha and Senju he murdered? Who knew how many innocent lives he took? Who knew what he'd do when she lets him go? She shook her head, forcing the debate from her thoughts and flicked the switch on, causing the electricity to shoot off and enter the young boy's body. She grabbed her scroll with her supplies and information stored in and her eyes shined back to her camp on the outskirts of a megacre. She grabbed her supplies and kicked out her fire and started packing her tent and bedroll and sealed them into a scroll, before taking off into the trees without looking back at the village. Boom. The trees shook and leaves were forced to flitter from their branches as the explosion was bigger than what Kaide had first anticipated. The lakes surrounding Emegakure shook and rippled as the shockwave shook the entire city and probably the entire country. Not once did the girl look back or worry about the countless lives that she probably took in that explosion. Not once did she feel a pang of hurt or regret. She was angry and she was out for blood. Okushin-jo, here I come, Kaide thought. That's 3 down, brother, mother. 2 weeks later in Konohagakure. Naruto was still comatose, but a scroll suddenly popped up next to him. Sasuke looked up and grabbed the scroll and read that it was from Kaide. He freaked out and quickly opened the scroll and began to read its contents. Dear Naruto ni-san, I have finally taken the first step in full vengeance for our family, and vengeance for you. I don't know if you're going to make it or not, but I will make sure that those who have wronged you will pay for their betrayal and actions. I will stop at nothing to end what they started. Already, I have killed Ishida Teramoto, Akano Takei and Mario Dao of the Kuroi Manto. I am currently on my way towards Okushin-jo to get more information about the perpetrators of the massacre. Ogura Kiyohisa, the main subordinate of Okano Tetsui, the head captain direct under Yamauchi Han. I can already see the look of surprise of Han's face when I dig my blade into his chest, just like he did to Mother. And I can't wait to see the day when I gut your attacker, my brother. You may not believe this, but I was told that the one who tried to kill you was Inoichi-san, but I don't want to believe it without the proper amount of information from those who were there. That is why I am taking on Kiyohisa. I believe he is the one who cut off Makoto Oba's head during the start of the massacre. I looked for his picture in the bingo books, but apparently, he doesn't have one except for the basic sketches by law enforcement in neighboring nations. I'm scared somewhat, brother. I don't know what I'm doing, or where I'm going, but I have to do this, so please, just stay where you are, if you're awake. I need to do this on my own. I don't know why I have to, but I just have a feeling that I have to. I love you. Don't forget that Ni-san. I'll be home soon. Namikaze Kaide, aka Haim no Konoha. Sasuke sighed and rolled up the scroll and placed it back onto the bedside table. He stood from his seat and headed out of the hospital room with a distraught expression about him. They were going to war with Iwa soon, but they needed the Golden Prince awake to make a heavy stand without the Uchiha or Senju clansmen at the front holding off Iwa's advances. The thought of his family brought pain to his chest, especially with the state that Itachi was in. He looked out the window of the hall and heaved a heavy sigh. It was just a few minutes past midnight. Kaide. In Tsuchi no Kuni, 5 miles from Okushin-jo. Kaide was sitting on a rock with a small flame in front of her as she bit into her deer and rice ball. She scratched the back of her neck with a blank look on her face. The fire in front of her flickered and cackled as it ate through the sticks and firewood gathered, and cooked the meat she had. She took a deep breath to calm her nerves and looked off into the distance. The great keep of Okushin-jo towered over much of the area. Its high peaks and powerful and omnipresent watchtowers were all she could see in the rocky horizon. Its roofs were painted green and brown with a little bit of gold intertwined. Despite the time being a few minutes after the stroke of midnight, the gold still glinted, showing off the castle's majestic beauty to anyone day or night. The red-headed girl was at first amazed and slack-jawed at the behemoth of a castle and realized that there are almost no castles like that in Hai no Kuni unless they were near or around the capital of the country. She needed a plan, she thought. She needed a really good plan. She stretched her sides and lay down onto her mat and stared at the star-studded night sky. I hope Ni-san is alright, Kaide sighed. I don't know why Kurama hasn't healed Naruto Ni completely yet. It's because I can't. Yin Kurama said to Kaide in her mind. My Yang is doing all he can to heal Naruto, but Naruto's brain is barely coping with the fact that he nearly died and that Kurotsuchi is the one who killed Ino. His brain is purposely staying in a coma. What? Kaide asked. That's what Yang told me. Kurama said before going back to sleep. Damn it, Kaide thought. Time to sleep, I guess. In Taki no Kuni, a young woman was standing in the former battlefield and found that many of the impact craters and lava constructs have been covered in overgrown grass and moss. She was supposed to be on a long-length mission, but she made a pit stop here at a place with so many memories. She traced her hands over the many Hiraishin kunai that have become useless because of the neglect they received for the past few months. She looked to the far side of the clearing and found the last place she and Naruto made love. A dried lava roof was formed over a blanket and some burned-out candles with a few dead roses and flowers in a vase. The entire room was filled with seals hiding it from everyone but Naruto and herself. She looked around and reminisced in the memories that shot into her mind as she took notice of the different things still remaining. She sat down on the blanket that they used to make love on so many times in the past. After everything that has happened, she couldn't help but shed a few tears. For almost 4 years, they were together, and after 4 years, they were going to run away together, but seeing as how everything has happened, that was out of the question. She traced her hands along the lava structure and felt the small engravings of silencing seals and felt the invisibility seals etched into the dry lava. I miss him, Kuro whispered. I don't know what happened to him other than that he was on the ground. I hope he's fine. I wouldn't be so sure, Kuro. A deep but feminine voice sounded from within. I know that you didn't notice, since your rage and jealousy got the better of you, but Naruto-kun was stabbed in the chest. What? Kuro gasped. She felt her heart pang heavily. How could that be? A man with long blonde hair tied in a ponytail under a henge attacked him in the midst of the chaos that ensued. The wolf replied. I don't know who it was, but it was quite peculiar seeing as how Hans Kuroi Manto let him through their lines. That bastard! Kuro shouted in anger. She slammed her fist into the side of the dry lava walls. How could he? Your brother knew all about you and Naruto-kun. The wolf replied once more. I don't know how, but he did, and he didn't like it. So what's going on now? Kuro asked. I believe there is only one way to make sure that Naruto-kun is alright. The wolf demon within replied. You're going to have to call Naruto-kun via Hiraishin. What? But I don't have the seal formula, nor do I even have the right anymore. Kuro replied in exasperation as tears formed in the corner of her eyes. After what I did to him and his family. That doesn't matter now. The wolf replied once more. What does is that you must make amends with the boy. Fine. I guess I should go ahead and try to copy the Hiraishin seal. With Kaide, the redhead was once again hanged, but this time she was just some lowly Iowa samurai that she picked off during one of his patrols. She was wearing his armor and his face through a henge, and no one expected her to be there. No one cared to check, so she was green to continue. She walked through the massive wooden gates studded with large metal studs and entered the cobblestone courtyard of the castle. In the center of the courtyard was a large fountain with lights and torches everywhere, surrounded by a beautiful garden and infantrymen posted all over the place. There were already at least 100 footmen marching and patrolling through the courtyard itself. She looked at the walls and found archers and long-range shinobi, from what her sensory skills told her, stationed all across the length of the wall and battlements. She followed a random patrol and broke from formation and subtly entered the main castle and broke henge and entered the main foyer disguised as some Iowa shinobi she remembered killing. There were naginata-wielding infantry and heavy guardsmen posted at each hall and entryway. At the base of the main stairs were two heavily armored samurai brutes with kanabo, instead of katanas. She quickly found a group of shinobi walking through a hallway and joined in, pretending that she wasn't there. She followed with the group up the stairs and to the second floor, where instead of guardsmen and samurai, it was a lot of shinobi and Iowa shinobi brutes. There were also a lot of Kuroi Manto and Ganbon agents walking around the second floor. Kaide made sure to keep to herself and not draw any attention. If she did, then it was over for her, unless she was able to get the Hiraishin to work faster than her brother and father. She kept watching her surroundings, but suddenly a loud crash was heard from the other side of the hall. All heads turned to see an extremely handsome man with spiky black hair and a strong jawline. His eyes were pink, just like a certain lava princess. He looked around and started marching off through the hall with an entourage of Junin commanders and samurai commanders trailing right behind him. Kiyohisa-sama, one of the commanders called out. You need to calm down. Calm down, Kiyohisa asked in exasperation. How can I calm down when I know that the aka harem is after me? We understand the situation, but, one of the other Junin commanders replied. No, I want extra patrols. I want extra reinforcements waiting in reserve. I want to make sure that she doesn't get in. Well, you're a little late for that, a voice said from down the hall. Kiyohisa looked in unbridled fear. All around the source of the voice were dead shinobi and guardsmen. In her hands was a bloodied katana. She wore golden-orange armor and had a head of flowing red hair. Woman had a beautiful face and had whisker marks adorning each cheek. Her eyes, though, were exploding with a blood-red color. She had a small smirk on her face as her canines elongated. Aaka Haim en no Ke Konoha. Some of the Junin commanders cried out in fear. The tension was so thick that a few of the not-so-powerful guardsmen passed out from just pure fear. Kaide tilted his head slightly and smiled at Kiyohisa. She didn't say anything but simply stared at the man without any emotion. Kiyohisa, though, was surprised and was captivated by her beauty, but then remembered that she was probably there to kill him. She lifted up a finger and already 3 Iowa Junin charged at her out of fear. Each Junin wielded a sword, but once they got into range, Kaide simply swung her sword up and slashed the face open of one of the shinobi. She spun on the ball of her right heel and dodged another Junin and slashed down on his back. Just as that Junin fell to the ground with blood pouring from his back and onto the floor below, she spun around once more and slashed open the chest of the third and final Junin that chose to challenge her. Come, Kaide taunted. Kiyohisa charged forward with a shout and punched for Kaide, but she dodged the attack and sent a left hook into his lower abdomen and had him stumbling. She jumped up and kneed his chin, stumbling him and putting him in a small daze. Just before she could hit the ground, she sent a roundhouse kick, sending Kiyohisa flying back. You're slower than I thought. Kaide smirked and charged forward with her katana drawn. Just before she could close the distance, she felt a sudden pull on her body. The katana shook and then her body soon shook along with it. Her eyes widened with confusion, but she shook it off and continued her charge towards her target. Kiyohisa bent back and brought up his hands to defend himself, but before Kaide could connect her attack, she vanished without a trace. In Taki no Kuni. Flash. Gura. Kaide flashed into the clearing with her sword still drawn. It took a moment for her to register where she was, and found that instead of Kiyohisa, she saw a girl wearing a cloak with a hood over her head was now in her line of sight. The cloaked girl backed away with lightning-fast skill, faster than what Kaide would have hoped. The redhead brought her foot out and dug into the ground to slow her assault and spun around on her toes to face the newcomer. The hooded girl gasped in surprise and removed her hood to reveal a pristine face, tired pink eyes and short black hair. The girl's mouth was agape with surprise. Kaide. What the air you doing here? Kurotsuchi asked in fear. Kurotsuchi. How the did you call me? Kaide replied with the same tone. Neither girl waited to get an answer and charged at each other with the intent to kill. Kaide closed the distance first and lunged with her katana, but Kurotsuchi was faster and blocked the attack with her own katana that she drew from within her cloak. The blades clashed, shooting off sparks in all directions. Kaide was the first to break the collision and sent an overhead strike at Kuro, but the black-haired girl raised her arm and blocked the attack. Kuro sliced her blade from Kaide's and kicked the redhead back and charged for the namikaze with her sword held out. Kuro swung forward with a strange stance that Kaide had never seen before and the two blades clashed once more, sending sparks into the air. Kaide sidestepped Kuro's lunge and sent an elbow into Kuro's spine, stumbling her stance slightly. Kaide was suddenly pulled back by a clone of Kuro and thrown to the other side of the clearing. It all happened so fast and neither was even able to compute what was happening. Kaide shook her head and 3 shadow clones popped into existence. Each one had the same smirk and had their swords drawn. The great thing about being Naruto's twin was the fact that whatever powers Naruto had, Kaide had as well. The three clones charged at Kurotsuchi with super fast speed, their golden armor glinting in the light of the crescent moon. The original Kaide jumped up with her sword over her head and landed just in front of Kuro and brought the sword down, nearly taking the Yamauchi's head off. Just as Kuro was about to recuperate from the attack, another clone came around with her sword drawn and sent a lunge for Kuro's face, but the black-haired princess blocked the attack, and redirected it elsewhere. Kaide saw this as an opening and charged for Kuro's vulnerable side, but her blade clashed with thick and heavy earth. The redhead backed away when she saw a Kurotsuchi clone jump from the girl's shoulder. It was made of earth and began to clear out and mold together to form a more realistic visual of the original. The Namikaze shook her head and sent a heavy haymaker, but barely managed to even shake the rock-hard clone of the lava princess. That's hard, Kaide whined. The redhead was caught off guard by the earth clone and was punched in the chest, knocking the wind from her lungs. Kaide was forced from her feet and landed onto one of the lava constructs that protruded from the clearing every here and there. The two girls jumped away from each other and examined the other's position and stance. Kuro narrowed her eyes and glared at Kaide, just as the redhead had done to her. Well then, aka Heim, Kuro taunted. Indeed Yugen Heim, Kaide replied. I think that was a nice little spar, Kuro said as she plopped down onto the ground. Her arm and chest needed healing. Kaide was no better, but she needed to know something. She charged for Kurotsuchi and pinned her against the wall of one of the dried lava constructs and held her kunai against the black-haired girl's neck. Kaide's eyes spelled bloody murder as she glared deep into Kurotsuchi's eyes. Where the hell is your brother? Kaide growled. Kuro took a moment before replying. I don't know. What the do you mean by, I don't know? He's your brother. Kaide tightened the pressure of the kunai. What I mean is that, my brother is on the run. Kurotsuchi replied as she slowly pushed the dumbfounded Kaide away from her. Kaide sat down on a rock and motioned for Kurotsuchi to do the same and also motioned for her to continue with her explanation. After the attack, my brother and I had a major talk, and things got heated and it turned into an all-out fight where I nearly vaporized him. Kurotsuchi said. My brother tried to kill me and his Kuroi Manto tried to fight my own, but they lost and they fled along with Han. What? Why? Kaide was surprised. In Iowa, we have specific rules and regulations for certain situations, such as assassination or slaughter of another clan or more. Kuro started. Those rules say that innocents must not be harmed or be shown any form of harm. The targets were the Uchiha clan and the Senju clan. Your father was a target since he was a descendant of the Senju as were you and your siblings, but Naruto wasn't to be touched, and neither was your mother, since your mother is of the Uzumaki clan. I see, Kaide said in understanding. Well, seeing as we have the same goals, do you mind helping me on my mission? What is your mission? Kurotsuchi asked. She seems to be almost exactly like her brother, so trusting in others. Assassination, vengeance. Kaide replied darkly. I am after your brother and the one who nearly killed my brother. Your brother almost died. Kuro gasped as a heavy pang of hurt beat in her chest. Wait, it's alright Kuro-chan, Kaide replied. I already knew about you and Naruto ni. What? How? Kurotsuchi asked in fear. We made sure to keep it a secret. I wasn't too sure at first but, Kaide trailed off. Every time we would meet each other here in Taki no Kuni to fight, you and Naruto ni would charge straight for each other. It almost seemed that you two were flirting with each other through your fists and swords. Well, Kurotsuchi blushed slightly and sighed. I can tell that you love him, Kaide said. And I can tell that he loves you too, but, why? Why did you have to do this and break his heart? He's in a coma right now because of the fact that his mind suffered from trauma, most likely the fact that he saw you kill his wife. That bitch didn't deserve him. Kurotsuchi shouted in anger as her chakra suddenly flared, blowing her hair all over the place, revealing small bruises on her temples and cheeks. Kaide gasped at the sight. She trailed her eyes over the rest of Kurotsuchi's body and found bruises and scars every here and there on her arms and legs and neck. I deserved him the most. I gave him everything, even my virginity. I loved him. I still love him. I was even going to be. Kurotsuchi suddenly stopped herself and collapsed onto the ground below her. Kaide was taken aback by the sudden change in attitude. There was a palpable silence that followed for the longest time as neither girl spoke up. Kaide began to think of all the possibilities of where Kurotsuchi could have gotten those bruises. Almost all of them looked recent and there was no way she could have gotten those bruises from Naruto. None of them looked like love bites, but instead, like she was punched or kicked and she didn't fight back. But just as Kaide began to come to different conclusions, Kurotsuchi suddenly sniffled. Wait. Kaide sat down next to her brother's lover. What were you going to be? I was going to be. Kurotsuchi couldn't even finish her statement. She suddenly burst into tears and leaned her head on Kaide's shoulder. Kaide was taken by surprise once again. 1 second Kurotsuchi was pissed off, then now she was sobbing onto her armor. Kurotsuchi continued to cry but then looked up to Kaide. I was going to be the mother of his child. Kaide's eyes shot from her head. Not once did her niece-san speak of Kurotsuchi getting impregnated. She would have thought that Kurotsuchi would have been safe with their escapades, but something must have made the girl think otherwise. Kurotsuchi continued to cry, but it soon turned into hysterical wailing. Kaide began to feel uncomfortable as the sorrow in her screams became contagious. What happened to make this such a bad memory? Kaide asked. 4 months ago, Kurotsuchi said. I found that I was pregnant with Naruto's baby. I had to see him and tell him. I really wanted to speak to him and I really wanted to see him and tell him what had happened. I wanted us to run away together. But before I could get out of the castle and call on Naruto-kun here, my lecherous husband caught me trying to sneak out. Oh Kurotsuchi, don't tell me. Kaide felt tears stinging the corners of her eyes. Her hand was pressed against her agape mouth. She could already tell where this was going. That bastard. Kurotsuchi's tears started falling again, but she was still able to speak. He forced abortion on the child. He killed Naruto-kun's baby. He beat me that night, and hurt me, and raped me. He turned me into his personal toy. I hate him with all of my soul. I just wanted to run away and live my life with Naruto. I can't believe this, Kaide said as tears started flowing down her cheeks as she grabbed Kurotsuchi in for a tight hug. Kurotsuchi was at first caught off guard, but loosened up and wrapped her arms around the redhead's back and began to cry once more. The two of them continued to cry until they could cry no more and just sat beneath the moon of the night. Thank you for listening, Kurotsuchi said suddenly. Why, you're welcome, Nei-chan. Kaide smiled a teary foxy grin. You seem to have been though a lot. Kami. Kurotsuchi sniffled hard. I needed that, and thank you, Imoto. The two sat in relative silence and stared off into the crescent moon above them. It was beautiful and shined down upon the two gorgeous angels like a spotlight. Kaide smiled softly and looked over to Kuro but looked back to the grass below her. Kurotsuchi smiled back and leaned her head against the solidified lava. Hey, if you need help in your mission, Kurotsuchi offered. I am technically on an S-class solo mission with an undefined amount of time. I would love that. Kaide smiled brightly. But, are you sure about killing your own people? These men have betrayed my people and my family, and yours. Kurotsuchi said. They deserve nothing less than death. But something is irking me. What? Kaide asked. The wolf told me that the one who stabbed Naruto-kun was a man with dirty blonde hair and it was in a ponytail, and he had teal green eyes. It can't be. Kaide's face paled slightly. There's only one person with that description. Do you know anyone with those features? Kurotsuchi asked. No, Kaide quickly replied. I have no idea, it could be anyone. Alright. Kurotsuchi sighed and lay on the grass. We should rest, and come up with a plan to get your target. 8 hours later, Kurotsuchi awoke to the smell of sizzling meat and cooking ramen. The pink-eyed girl relished in the smell of ramen, especially since it was Naruto's favorite food. She could already feel his presence, but once her vision cleared up she laid her eyes upon a beautiful woman with red flowing hair. She had vibrant, electric blue eyes with whisker marks on her cheeks. She was stirring the food in a cooking spit over a fire. The sun was up and a new day had dawned for the new duo. Kurotsuchi suddenly remembered her encounter with Namikaze Kaide, twin sister of Naruto. Kuro thought about the entire situation and realized that Kaide had taken the information quite well considering the fact that they were supposed to be enemies, especially since a war was imminent. But she was prepared to do what was necessary for her people. The princess pushed herself off the grassy clearing and trudged over to Kaide and plopped down on a rock and grabbed a bowl. Kaide sent a small smile at Kurotsuchi and grabbed her ladle and poured a good amount into Kurotsuchi's bowl before chowing down on her own food. The smell of sizzling meat entered Kuro's and Kaide's noses, causing their stomachs to growl viciously, despite the fact that they were already eating a delicious breakfast. Kaide removed her chopsticks from her noodles and grabbed a small piece of deer meat and flopped it around in her ramen. This is a lot better than what Naruto would cook, Kurotsuchi giggled. You know, he never knew how to cook. Kaide said with a noodle hanging out of the side of her lips. I had to go over with him at least 200 times on how to crack eggs. Really? Kurotsuchi started giggling once more. That's kinda sad for a man of his stature. He can kill hundreds, but he can't crack a simple egg. I know. He's an idiot. Kaide snickered. But, I love him. He's my brother. Better yet, he's my twin, and I wouldn't want him to be anything else other than what he already is. Well said Imoto, Kurotsuchi smiled. So, tell me about your Imoto and Ototo. Well, Mito is a lot like me, but she has blonde hair, whisker marks of course, and the same violet eyes as my mother. She's a hard-headed 3-year-old, but she's so adorable when she sleeps. She always has a small snot bubble form when she sleeps, and her twin brother, Arashi. Kaide said, but Kurotsuchi interrupted. Hold on, twin? Kurotsuchi asked with a questioning look. Yup. Kaide chirped happily. Your mom must have been super fertile then, Kurotsuchi said with wide eyes. Kaide felt a small pang of sadness when Kuro mentioned her mother, but shook it off and giggled. She had me and Naruto when she was 16. Kaide said. Wow, Kurotsuchi said with wide eyes. No wonder she looked amazing, she must have been what, 36 years old? Exactly. Kaide smirked. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, Arashi. Cute name by the way. Kurotsuchi piped. He has black hair with blood-red strands. Yeah, I don't know either. But he basically has my mother's face, mother's personality, mother's laugh, mother's everything minus the obvious. He is very energetic like his big bro Naruto, but he's also kind of a control freak-ish, well as far as a control freak could get with toddlers. He tried to take my Hiraishin kunai and started throwing them everywhere and started flashing about like some red flash devil. Kaide giggled. From that day, we realized that he was just as much as a prodigy as Naruto and I are. Well then, a clan of Hiraishin users, Kuro downcasted. Just hope that the war won't be too bad and that with Naruto and my help, we can bring peace between our nations. Kaide smiled. Ni-san always spoke of peace and hoped to make a better future without all of this pointless strife. So, does Naruto know about this mission? Kuro asked. Hell no, if he found out, he'd kill me so fast, Kaide sighed. Revenge is taboo in our family. It is something that we must not take under any and all circumstances. He would get so pissed off if he found out what I did to those Kuroi Manto members and Manto fodder back in Omegakure. That was you. Kurotsuchi shouted. The Iowa princess shivered involuntarily and saw Kaide in a whole new light. I swear, I'm going to love hanging out with you. I could say the same with you, Nei-chan. Kaide smirked. You're by far the only kunoichi that could match me in an all-out fight with Kenjutsu. We didn't even get into ninjutsu. Oh, I would love to fight you with ninjutsu. Kurotsuchi smiled. She shivered in the anticipation of such a fight. I would too, but now, Kaide said, getting down to business. What can you tell me about Ogura Kiyohisa? Kiyohisa? Kurotsuchi asked in surprise. What about him? He's my target, Kaide said with a raised eyebrow. Well, for one thing, Kuro struggled. He's, kinda, my cousin, on my mother's side, hence the pink eyes. Well then, this is interesting. Kaide said. You know that he was. Yes, I know. Kaide said. He was at the massacre. He was the one who beheaded the Uchiha matriarch. His sensei, Okano Tetsui, is the one who plunged an arrow into the Uchiha patriarch's head. What of his skills? Kaide asked. Connections. Weaknesses. Strengths. He is highly proficient with lava release, that's for certain. He's the one who helped teach me after all, you know. Connections. Well, from what I can tell, he is the only one who knows where Tetsui is. Weaknesses. He's too quick to overestimate and underestimate his opponents. Whereas, I will play around with my prey and gauge their power. Strengths. Well, he's very smart and uses that to his advantage. He is a combat genius and has never lost a battle, despite his obvious weaknesses. He is also highly proficient in Kenjutsu, so a swordfight would be pretty interesting. I see, and this Okano Tetsui, what about him? Kaide asked. The bingo books have nothing on him, almost as if he doesn't exist. The only way I knew about him was when I extracted information from one of the prisoners I took. What was his name? Mario Dao, a lieutenant for Hans Kuroi Manto. Tetsui is a true military mastermind. He was the one behind the construction of Okushin-jo and appointed his personal apprentice, my cousin, Okano Kiyohisa, as master of the Okushin-jo. Because of its imposing size and power, my father wouldn't dare to assault the fortress, leaving Kiyohisa with the entire force of the large 500-strong garrison. There are more stationed within the castle itself. The castle is almost impossible to sap, because of the fact that it is reinforced with earth jutsus and whatnot. Kurotsuchi said. So attacking and killing my cousin won't be easy. We'll need a foolproof plan. I think I have one, Kaide smirked. Pray tell, Kurotsuchi asked, getting interested. Well, remember how you called me here by accident? Kaide asked. Yeah, well, since you always channeled chakra into Hiraishin seals to call my brother, do the same with my Hiraishin seals. Kaide said. I will slap a reverse Hiraishin seal on his body and that will flash him to your position back here in Taki no Kuni. I will flash here right behind him and we'll get to access the important information about Tetsui. Oh, another thing. Tetsui is also a direct commander underneath Han, ranking number 3 with the other commanders, not including Han. Tetsui knows where the next in line is located at. The farther we dig, the deeper we'll be in this whole ordeal. Kurotsuchi said. I don't understand this either, but from Tetsui comes Manabu Aige, then to Uemura Soichiro as number 1, then finishing off with the grand prize of Yamauchi Han. This is only going to get interesting, Kaide smirked. Let's eat up before the assault is to begin, alright? I don't want you getting too weak to imprison your family member. Don't worry about it, Imoto. Just kick some out there. Kurotsuchi smirked. Will do, Nei-chan. Kaide then flashed out of the area, leaving Kurotsuchi alone once more. In Tsuchi no Kuni, Okushinjo, courtyard. Flash. Infantry heard the blast of energy and instantly went into action. They saw the flash, but waited for the person to come out of the slash in the dimension. Infantry were on a high alert, especially after the incident the night before. Suddenly, the ground began to shake beneath the infantry. Shinobi looked intrigued but didn't do anything. Doden. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. The shout came from beneath the ground and it seemed to be a large attack force coming from beneath the ground. The infantry had looks of fear on their faces as they were pulled into the ground with only their heads sticking from the ground. In their former position above the ground, stood a woman with a golden mask and had a flowing head of red hair. Her eyes were a piercing blue with small strands of violet in her irides. She wore a golden plate with golden shin guards. It's the Aaka Heim. One of the infantry men screamed in fear. Well, it's nice to know that I'm known. She tilted her head and flashed once more, but with her sword angled down and flashed past the infantry heads poking up from the ground. Their heads shot from the ground like bamboo shoots and landed around her as blood rained down from the sky. Kaide stopped and sheathed her sword to glare menacingly at the shinobi coming down from the top of the walls of the fortress. Many were Junin-leveled shinobi and all of them had slashes through their Hitai-8. Kaide merely smirked and threw up the horse hand seal. Kaden. Goka Mekyaku. She took a deep breath and shot forth a powerful blast of fire, like what her brother does. The flames shot forward and burned through the earth defenses and earth shinobi, before they could even get their defenses up. Many died within the second the flames left her mouth. She jumped back a few feet and sped through more hand seals. Kaden. Hausenka no Jutsu. The fireballs shot from her mouth but, just before they could hit the stragglers in the courtyard, a large wall of lava was formed, taking the hit instead of the shinobi. Kaide quickly swiveled her head to see Kiyohisa aided by 4 samurai dressed in full battle armor. They had battle banners with the words instant death in kanji. The samurai, instead of having a flame on their kabuto helmets, they had the symbol of Iwa on their foreheads. They were armed with naganatas and katanas on their sides. Their armor was maroon with brown, signifying their allegiance, or in this case, former allegiance to Iwagakure. Their faces were covered by face masks that resembled the Chikyushin of Tsuchi no Kuni. The open-mouth guards filled with sharp teeth pried from the mouths of Tsuchi no Kuni foxes. Those disrespectful curs, Yin Kurama growled from within Kaide's mindscape. They murdered my kin. Don't worry, Kurama. We'll make them pay, but first, I want Kiyohisa. Kaide charged forward without much care. The first samurai came around and swung his naginata viciously at her, but the redhead backed away and dodged the attack like it was nothing and kicked the spear head off and made it fly into the body of an infantryman. She spun around on the ball of her heel and drew out a 3-pronged kunai and tackled him to the ground with chakra building off the main point of the kunai. Kaide growled and surged her chakra, forming a large blade, causing it to plunge through his heart. She pushed off the dead samurai and drew out her katana after hurling her kunai at another samurai. The next samurai clashed his naginata with her sword, and forced sparks to fly. She ducked as he swung for her head once more. She jumped forward and sent a leg sweep, knocking the man over onto his back. She lifted her katana over her head and brought it down onto the samurai and forced the blade through his thick armor. Because of this, her sword got stuck in his slashed open chest. The last 2 samurai charged forward with their naganatas pointed at her. One lunged forward, but the girl dodged and brought her forearms down, snapping the spear into thirds. She grabbed the blade of the spear and shoved it into the samurai's temple, killing him immediately, while opening up for Kaide to rush forward for the last samurai guard. He stabbed his naginata into the ground when he realized that spears were of no effect against the kunoichi. He drew out his katana and slashed forward, cutting off a few strands of hair from her head. Kaide backed away and swung forward, clashing her blade against his. The redhead narrowed her eyes at her situation and smirked. She shut her eyes and 3 pops of smoke were heard. The samurai and Kiyohisa's eyes widened. Once the smoke cleared, it came to reveal 3 other Kaides standing in their battle stances with their katanas drawn. The 3 Kaides reached into their kunai pouches and pulled out a scroll. The original stood in between the 3 clones while the clones opened up the scrolls. Once the scrolls were completely unraveled, it came to reveal a large seal in the center of the sheet with the kanji for kunai. More infantry poured out into the courtyard with shinobi closely following behind. Kaide smirked at her luck. Wait! Kiyohisa screamed once he realized what the scrolls held, but it was too late. After a small pop of smoke from each scroll, Hiraishin kunai began to shoot from the seals in all directions, hitting men, walls, animals, and buildings for the next few minutes. Okushin-jo was pelted with Hiraishin kunai non-stop. But once it did finish, it came to reveal a porcupine state courtyard with wounded infantry and shinobi lying about with 1 or 2 Hiraishin kunai embedded in their chests or other body parts. While a large amount was wounded, there were still hundreds of infantry and shinobi still stationed in the fortress. Hiraishin no Jutsu. Not too long afterwards, Kaide stood in the center of the bloodbath that Okushin-jo had become and smirked at the blood-soaked Kiyohisa. The entire fortress was eradicated of its garrison by 1 person in less than a second. Everything happened so fast. Kiyohisa had never seen anything like it. He shit and pissed his pants from the sheer power of the namikaze. Kaide's red hair waved softly in the ominous breeze flowing through the busted courtyard and ruined walls. There were of course, a few stragglers, but they were too wounded to do anything. Deep gashes and slashes were causing many of the wounded to die from blood loss. There were limbless shinobi and headless infantry. Some were screaming in pain, while others held the same expression they had when they were still alive, fear. It was too fast. Almost as fast as the Kogen no Oji or the Kiroi Senko. The remaining men were horrified of the redhead's skills and many of the remaining died shortly afterwards. Kaide continued to glare at the man in front of her and sheathed her sword. She had a calm pace with her steps and slowly walked up to the shell-shocked Iwa shinobi. Kiyohisa, though, was frozen in place as fear crept in. He was right with his plan to reinforce the fortress. She met him face to face and took off the mask from her face and gave the man a small smile. Kiyohisa felt his heart rate speed up in fear. The smile was filled with so much malice that the man couldn't help but to feel the effects of lightheadedness. He didn't say a word. He couldn't even will his mind to reply or say a thing to his once true fear. He wasn't one to fear anything since he was the one who volunteered to be the one to kill the Uchiha matriarch, despite the fact that he wanted to rape her first. He felt a great deal of killing intent and shrunk slightly from the chakra pressure that Kaide was emitting. Kaide, because of her biju, could sense the emotions flittering around Kiyohisa's mind and kicked the man down to the blood-drenched floor. She placed her foot on the man's unprotected throat and put pressure. As she did this, she looked about the courtyard and found bodies and parts of bodies, littering every crack and crevice of the castle. There were bodies on the rooftops, in the walls, on the floor, but the most disturbing part of the castle was the once beautiful and clear water fountain in the center of the courtyard was now shooting off gallons of blood instead of water. Heads and part of heads floated in the water at the base of the fountain. All of this happened in less than 5 seconds. Kaide looked down to see Kiyohisa turning blue. She removed her foot and slapped the man across the face, forcing a reverse Hiraishin seal on his cheek. She raised her hand for the jutsu and the unconscious man flashed out of the courtyard, leaving Kaide behind. Just before she could leave as well, an arrow lodged itself in between her legs, and punctured the ground beneath her. She turned around and narrowed her eyes at the newcomer. He was dressed in a black cloak signifying his Kuroi Manto status, but she didn't know who the man was. He was aided by 2 other black cloaks. They were standing at the top of the wall on the far side of the courtyard. She channeled her sensory chakra and widened her eyes when she felt that all 3 black cloaks had massive amounts of chakra. So, it seems that the aka harem is on a vengeance streak. The man said as he and his 2 companions jumped down from the wall segment and landed gracefully on the corpse-covered courtyard. Their cloaks waved in the wind as their feet touched the ground below. They removed their hoods and narrowed their eyes at the Kunoichi princess. The one in the middle seemed to be a middle-aged man with graying hair, but his eyes were filled with so much unbearable power. His chakra reserves were off the charts, and he seemed to be holding back. Next to him was a black-haired Kunoichi with orange eyes. Her eyes were fierce. She too seemed to be holding back, but the last and final was a Kunoichi as well, with blood-red hair and green eyes. She was glaring at Kaide with deep animosity. The 2 girls drew out a black katana while the middle man drew out a kusarigama. "Who are you?" Kaide asked with a smirk. 2 shadow clones popped up next to her. "It seems that you've been searching for me, but you don't even know what I look like." The old man laughed. "I'm Okano Tetsui. These 2 are my daughters, Yasuha and Hatami. They don't like Konoha shinobi, much less Konoha royalty." "Oh really now?" Kaide asked with sarcasm. "Yes, Yasuha," the redhead growled. "That's why we relished in the destruction of your clan. And it also seems that your own clans can't be trusted." Hatami sneered. "But all of that is beside the point. We'll tell you all that you want to know," Tetsui said. "When your guts are splayed across the ground." Hatami and Yasuha charged forward at lightning-fast speeds and clashed with Kaide. The Namikaze was horrified by their speed and took a quick sidestep to block the hard-hitting black-haired Manto. Hatami sent a drop kick at Kaide, causing the girl to lose her footing and nearly lose her head. Kaide jumped back as a clone jumped in to clash with Hatami. But in the midst of the fighting, Yasuha charged in from the left and sliced at Kaide's side, causing a small gash to form on Kaide's abdomen. The red-headed Namikaze yelped in pain and jumped back a few more feet. She gripped her side to feel a clean cut through her gold armor and into her skin. Good thing it was only a flesh wound. She removed her hand from the cut to see it drenched in her own blood. The girl grunted slightly before focusing her sights on Yasuha. As it was, this apparent Manto is the only person to have ever injured Kaide, let alone scratch her. This put a major dent on the Namikaze's ego. "This bitch is going to die," Kaide growled. Kaide channeled the yang chakra of her biju and vanished into the shadows of the courtyard. Hatami and Yasuha went back to back after disposing of Kaide's other clone. The 2 girls had their weapons held out and stayed steady with their defense. They had no emotion but hate in their different colored eyes. Suddenly from beneath them, a shadow shot from the ground and lodged its fist into Hatami's chin, sending her into the air, leaving Yasuha open for attack. Kaide was in a black version of Naruto's biju cloak and lunged forward with her katana. The Manto suddenly spun around and clashed her blade with Kaide's. The girl's eyes nearly shot from her head in surprise. "That can't be," Kaide cried out. "Damn it, I'm running really low on chakra." But in her moment of confusion, Yasuha spun around and lodged her foot into Kaide's face and sent the Namikaze flying back. The girl smashed through a building, kicking up a large amount of smoke in her wake. But the surprise was up in the sky. Hatami was flying with her hands outstretched. In her open palms was a three-dimensional cube glowing with a bright intensity. Hatami looked down to her father and received a nod. Jinten. Hakuri no Jutsu. The cube expanded and shot for the Namikaze still in the building. Once the jutsu was finished, Hatami slowly descended down to the courtyard floor and smiled at her sister. Yasuha smiled back and sheathed her sword. But then her right eyebrow twitched slightly. Flash. Yasuha drew her sword once again, this time when her blade clashed with Kaide's, the Namikaze's sword shattered completely, leaving Kaide with a metallic stump. Kaide's heart lurched at the sight of her favorite sword shatter before her eyes. Kaide was hit by a roundhouse kick from Hatami and sent flying into a pile of dismembered bodies. You know, Yasuha smirked. I thought the aka harem would be more of a threat. Indeed, sister. Hatami smirked. I wonder if her comatose brother could put up more of a fight than this disgrace of a princess. TCH, Kaide grunted. Don't effing underestimate me. The red-headed girl revealed her mother's side and charged for the two Iwa Manto girls. The Namikaze was seeing red and let her rage get the best of her. Kaide swung for Yasuha, but the red-headed Iwa Kunoichi simply sidestepped the attack and let Kaide stumble over a dismembered arm beneath her. Who taught you this atrocious fighting style? Hatami asked from the sidelines. I bet her mother did. Yasuha and Hatami started giggling. No wonder she's dead. Don't you dare slander my mother's name. Kaide roared in pure unbridled anger. Kaide kicked for Yasuha's smug-looking face, but the girl simply slapped Kaide's kick away and swept her feet from under her, causing the Namikaze to fall onto her back. Tears formed in Kaide's eyes. Ah, is the little aka harem about to cry? Yasuha asked with a small smirk. Kaide's eyes trailed over to her stumped sword. She eyed the designs in the Uzumaki swirl proudly emblazoned on the handle and blade. Tears fell when the memories of the sword came rushing into her mind. Kaide couldn't move though. She trailed her eyes up to see Yasuha step over her and bend down to pick up Kaide's sword. This sword, the girl said, must have been of the Uzumaki clan's design. Indeed, Kaide grunted in pain. No wonder it's so shitty. Yasuha laughed as she sealed it into a scroll. A girl like you doesn't deserve the power of Kurama. A girl like you doesn't deserve power. You're way out of your league here, so I would suggest that you give up this little vendetta, since it isn't going to get you anywhere. How many more lives must you waste? Already, you have killed at least 20 of our good friends. Hatami said. Your journey ends here, Namikaze. Go home to the remaining family you have before it's too late. I swear. Kaide felt her tears build up once more. If you harm my family, what are you going to do? Yasuha asked. What the hell do you think you can do? I'll kill you both, Kaide growled. Then I'll go after your father. Hey. Hatami smirked. Those are impossible goals you're setting for yourself. Well then. Yasuha looked up to see her father motioning them to hurry up. It's time for us to leave. But not without a going away present. Hatami spun through hand seals. Gogyo Fuin. Each fingertip had a glowing flame of a different color. On her thumb, the flame was blue with the kanji for water in the center. On her index finger, the flame was red with the kanji for fire in the center. On her middle finger, the flame was a dark purple with the kanji for lightning in the center. On her ring finger, the flame was brown with the kanji for earth in the center. And finishing off with her pinky finger, the flame was white with the kanji for wind in the center. Yasuha sliced open Kaide's plate to reveal her bra and bare navel. The 8-pronged seal that held the Kyuubi at bay was visible to the two girls. Kaide tried to focus chakra, but she was too weak. Hatami rammed her hand onto Kaide's gut, forcing the seal onto her body. The red-headed Namikaze was forced up and coughed up a large amount of blood. The effects were immediate. Kaide's eyes rolled to the back of her head and she collapsed onto the ground below. Hatami and Yasuha smirked and jumped away for their father who was waiting for them outside of the fortress walls. In his hand was a Hiraishin kunai and in the other was a scroll with the name Kiyohisa in kanji on its cover. Tetsui opened the scroll and sped through a long series of hand seals. Once he finished, he channeled a small amount of chakra into his palm and looked down at the scroll. The contents of the scroll was the name of Kiyohisa and a large abundance of seals that were drawn around his name. Tetsui slammed his palm down onto Kiyohisa's name and channeled the chakra and smiled at the result. Once the old man removed his hand from the scroll, it came to reveal an empty space in the center of the scroll where Kiyohisa's name once was. Tetsui smirked at his handiwork and motioned for his two daughters to follow him out of the area. In Taki no Kuni, she's been gone too long, Kurotsuchi said to herself. You traitorous bitch, Kiyohisa shouted. How could you betray us? Your own family, your people. I'm not betraying anyone, Kurotsuchi shouted back. I am only doing what is right for the elemental nations as a whole. Then help us in the coming war. Kiyohisa replied. Why do you think we went after the Namakazes? I know why. Kurotsuchi punched the man in his face. My brother and his forces got too carried away. No, Kiyohisa smirked. You must not know then. Know what? Kurotsuchi asked. It was all part of the plan, Kiyohisa ambiguously stated. What plan? Oh, nothing. Kiyohisa smirked once more. That Yamanaka stabbing your precious Naruto-kun wasn't a lie either, it's all. The pink-eyed boy coughed mid-sentence. Kurotsuchi's went wide. She wrapped her hands around the boy's face and made him look at her. Upon closer inspection, Kiyohisa had black seals growing from his tongue and out of his mouth. Kurotsuchi's eyes went wide when she recognized the seals. They were cursed seals used by the Ganbon to hide any evidence of their presence. Kurotsuchi growled and jumped back a few feet while the seals expanded and grew all over his body. Damn it! Kurotsuchi jumped into the ground and began to burrow deep into the earth to protect herself against the wide range of the cursed seal. After a few minutes of waiting underneath the earth, she dug back to the surface to find a large crater in the middle of the clearing with Kiyohisa lying down in the center, as dead as it gets. I have to call Kaide back now, Kurotsuchi sighed. She will not be happy about this. Hiraishin no Jutsu. Flash. Oh, Kaide-chan. Lying on the grass not too far from Kurotsuchi's position was a bleeding and topless Namikaze Kaide with a strange seal placed over her Jinchuriki seal. Kurotsuchi looked over Kaide's body with deep concern as she examined the damage done to the redhead's body. Light bruises were all over her chest and navel. But the wound that really irked Kurotsuchi was the large and blackening scab on her side. Kaide's skin looked paler than what it usually was. It scared her. Quote exclamation mark. I don't know what to do. Kurotsuchi fell down onto her knees. What do I do?